Now, first of all, let me welcome all of you to this first online talk of the ICCC Speakers Forum. And we have a great speaker with us, Nand Tandan, a renowned economist and a great friend of ours. And so we will have a good time listening to him. At the end of his talk, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. Now, I know that we have been cooped up, we have been confined to our home for quite some time, and practically no social interaction. So what can we do to get over this feeling? And I can think of a few things. First and foremost, I can think of is a little bit of laughter, a little bit of humor. That goes a long way. And so I found this wonderful thing that I want to share with you. So here is the man saying it's the 100th day of the pandemic and we should crack open a bottle of something special. And so the wife brings a bottle of hand sanitizer and pops it open. Or we have every day heard something from Trudeau, a prime minister promising something or the other. So I put together my version of it. So he says, I'm pleased to announce that all children 20 years or under get a candy bar. No applications required. You should have identified them as...
I should put my name in.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you heard about this one, surely. So made in India is more important than made in India. So a family friend or a family from India wrote to me saying, मेरे घर में आई नहीं है बाई, बर्तन में लग गई है काई. So we are two of us in the homes. I wrote back, मेरे घर में दो दो बाई, यहीं रहता है कहीं नहीं जाए. But besides the humor, there is also other things that can help us in this time of self-isolation. And of course, there is the yoga and the pranayam and the prayer and the songs and discussions. And the ICCC Seniors Program provides a very nice, wonderful way of fulfilling that need. And then we have also the opportunity to hear our friends and speakers on topics that will interest us at this time. And we had the privilege today of listening to one of our dear friends to talk about post-COVID economy. Nand Tandan, you all know him, so I won't take the time to introduce him. He's going to speak about post-COVID economy. Invite Nand to speak. Nand, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jagmohan, and thank you all of you who have come to listen to me. I hope you don't get too disappointed. Jagmohan introduced me as a renowned economist. I might qualify that I'm renowned only to him and to some others. So, I should start by saying that COVID-19 is still very much here and getting stronger in much of the world, while weakening in some places, happily, including Canada. The impact of this pandemic will be deeper and more profound the longer it takes to control it. And it is increasingly believed that this pandemic is likely to last years, not quarters. So a medium-term new normal is going to be living with this virus while waiting for the longer-term normal when the war against this virus is finally over. A second warning I would like to make is that economists are pretty good at explaining what happened, but no better than weather forecasters when making long-term predictions. For example, any forecasts made 6 months ago should now be thrown into a dustbin. With these caveats, let me outline some of the changes that are likely to happen in the post-COVID-19 world. It is a vast subject, and I would only touch on a few topics. This um, pandemic is has already and will continue to accelerate uh, towards digital economy. The world has been moving towards a digital economy since the launch of the commercial internet, and especially since the invention of smartphone, smart mobile phone. This pandemic will only accelerate this change. Let me start with an example. I know someone who applied for a competition for a job in the federal government a few months ago. As most of us know, it takes months in the government from the time of application for a job and the actual results. Last week, he was told that he won the competition. In the meantime, he had decided to move to Montreal. When he made this fact known to the concerned department, they said that he did not have to stay in Ottawa and could work from Montreal. Now, this fact becomes more significant as this particular department does not even have a regional office in Montreal, and he would be working from his home. Now, if he can work from Montreal, he can as easily work from Florida or Bangalore or Nairobi or Timbuktu. In fact, anywhere in the world where there's a reliable internet. Working remotely is not new. The technology has been there for some time, even for virtual meetings like the one we are having now. But the pandemic has familiarized more and more people with the possibilities of the new technology and the various and innovative ways in which it can be used. So it is unlikely that everyone will go back to the old brick and mortar office after the pandemic. Most of you have probably read or heard that one of Canada's largest company and Ottawa's largest
I can set you up with a new password. That's what I'm saying. I can send you like a new password. You can punch it right in.
Okay, I'll continue.
Yeah.
Most of you probably have read or heard that one of Canada's largest company and Ottawa's largest, Shopify, has announced that it would move to a permanent remote work model. Its CEO tweeted that as of today, Shopify is a digital by default company. Similar announcements have been made by a large bank in Manhattan, New York, and even by the president of the Treasury Board of Canada. I personally don't think that remote work alone will work. People would want to have social contact for team building and synergy that comes only from real, not virtual meetings. So some form of hybrid office would emerge where people can come to office once or twice a week and work remotely most of the time. New types of office configurations, something along the line of we work will emerge. As someone has said, office attendance will become a memory for some, a daily delight for others, and a movable feast for most. The consequences of this shift out of the downtown office will be huge. It will adversely affect the downtown commercial real estate. Office workers are generally better paid, and there are several ancillary services such as restaurants, coffee houses, bars, transportation that depend upon these workers. At the same time, the emptying out of office buildings will make it possible to repurpose these buildings for residential or for other public purposes. But not every old job remotely done will continue. In fact, many of the last jobs, both remote and physical, will. It has been estimated that 2/5 of those laid off or furloughed workers will lose their jobs permanently. Every great recession results in bankruptcies. This pandemic will be no exception. Many companies have already announced bankruptcies or are in the process of doing so. They include large companies like Hertz Car Rental Company and small ones like restaurants and retailers who may not be able to survive sustained loss of business. Starbucks has announced the closure of several shops in Canada. At the same time, new jobs will come up. Generally speaking, companies in the digital economy like Amazon and Google and those who can successfully migrate to digital platform will succeed. This has been happening already and will only accelerate. Now, I'm going to come to remote learning. Just like remote work, the concept of remote learning is not new. Professor Humer here will tell you that universities have been offering online courses and even awarding online diplomas for quite some time. The current pandemic has made it necessary not only for universities, but also for school education. When Ontario's provincial government proposed some online courses last year, they were opposed as unworkable by both teachers and their unions. But pandemic has forced school boards to provide education via virtual classrooms. The effect of this shift has yet to be assessed. But it seems clear that some online courses will now be introduced when schools open for the next academic year. Just like office work, brick and mortar educational institutions are not going to disappear anytime soon. There will always be a need for physical classroom, especially for subjects like science and engineering. So, some hybrid form of education combining elements of physical and online learning are likely to emerge, and I guess are already emerging, especially for junior and high school students, in addition to universities and colleges. Perhaps Professor Humer may like to elaborate it on a little more at the end of my lecture. Now I'm going to come to the macroeconomic implications, which is general economic implications of what is happening. The scene you just saw was from a popular Netflix series called Money Heist. In this series, a gang of bandits take over the Spanish mint and print 2 billion euros. They portray themselves as fighting the evil capital system, and to win popular support, they rain money in Madrid from a helicopter. I was reminded of this scene when I saw our Prime Minister coming on TV every morning and announcing generous giveaways of money to one section of the society or another. What will be the consequences of these humongous relief packages of $3 trillion by the United States, hundreds of billions of dollars by Canada, and several other countries in Europe, and even developing countries like India? And these measures are not over yet. Prime Minister Trudeau has announced that the government will do whatever it takes to meet the needs of Canadians. Other governments are likely to do the same, both in other countries and in Canada by provincial governments. So what are likely long-term consequences of these actions? This rain of dollars has been supported by almost all economists, whether of left or right bend. A long-standing radical policy which has support both among Keynesian and neoliberal economists is that of a universal basic income. Under this policy or program, every citizen should be given a guaranteed minimum income regardless of their labor force status. Pilot test projects of such policies and programs have been undertaken in places such as New Jersey in the United States and in Manitoba, going back to 1980s. However, the only two countries I'm aware of which have such programs are Iran and Finland. The current crisis in which almost everyone received a minimum amount, has restarted the conversation about a universal guaranteed income in at least some European countries. In the same vein, the last 4 decades had seen the dominance of neoliberal economists of Chicago School of Economics, associated with the likes of Milton Friedman and Gary Becker. They believed that the government should intervene only minimally in the marketplace. These ideas were embraced by the likes of Donald Reagan in the United States and Margaret Thatcher in the UK in 1980s, and even by India when it launched its economic reform program under Dr. Manmohan Singh during the 1990s. But during the current crisis, there has been no opposition to the massive intervention by governments, not only in the form of direct stimulus, but also in bailing out large and small firms by guaranteeing loans and subsidies to struggling companies. 10 years ago, when the United States and Canada bailed out General Motors and Chrysler Corporation with direct support, there was much opposition from some quarters. There has been virtually none this time. In some cases, it has taken the form of potential direct equity ownership. One can also see it in the clamor for government takeover of long-term care facilities. In places like the United States, there has also been a realization of the needs for universal health care as the inequality of their health services became so obvious during the corona crisis. Neoliberal economics is also associated with free trade, a lowering of trade tariffs and trade barriers among nations, and strengthening of international organizations such as the World Trade Organization. The last 20 years have been an era of globalization. Now, the globalists are in retreat. The resentment against globalization had started in the United States even before Donald Trump became the US president. Americans believed that China was taking advantage of its liberal policies through currency manipulation, theft of intellectual property, and denying equal playing field to its corporations in this Chinese market, the so-called Great Firewall of China. The process gained speed in the United States after the election of Donald Trump. Now, the pandemic has brought to other nations the need for self-sufficiency as global supply chains got disrupted and countries scrambled to seek access to limited supplies of medicines and face masks and personal protective equipment. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also given the call for Atmanirbharta or self-reliance. The next few years are likely to see a deceleration of global trade and a decline of multilateral organizations such as the World Trade Organization. Ironically, this also will see a supposedly communist China replace the United States as a champion of free trade. Question has been raised, will all this lead to inflation? Massive government spendings result in increased supply if the governments do not collect enough revenues to incur these expenditures, as is currently the case in both the United States and Canada. This increase in money supply is through measures variously called quantitative easing or deficit financing, with the central bank purchasing government or corporate bonds. The result is, in effect, printing money. Will this massive infusion of money in both Canada and elsewhere in the United States cause inflation? This is a legitimate question. Basic economic rationale dictates that increased money supply will result in inflation as there's more money chasing the supply of same goods and services. However, this is not likely to happen in the next 1 or 2 years for the following reasons. The relationship between money supply and inflation has proven to be weaker in the recent past than was earlier thought. When the United States Reserve resorted to massive quantitative easing in the wake of the financial disaster of 2008-2009, most economists it looks like I have lost my lost my I got it. Most economists expected a spike in prices. However, inflation has remained remarkably low since then. The central banks have kept interest lows while the economies boomed and the unemployment rates fell to their lowest levels in recent past, especially in the United States. So what happened? The prices remained low because the increasing globalization provided cheap phones, computers, televisions, as well as textiles and shoes from countries with cheap labor. And now also by use of robots. One might ask then what happened to the excess money supply? In my opinion, the answer is that it led to the inflation of assets such as stocks and real estate and investment overseas by the multinational corporations. This also led to increased inequalities in incomes and wealth. Moreover, one, the pandemic relief packages replaced labor incomes lost by people who have lost their job. Two, in this next year or two, the economy is likely to remain in deep recession. Many of the jobs will not come back soon or not come back at all. New jobs, especially in the digital economy, will come, but they will take time to fully compensate for the massive job losses that have taken place. Thirdly, having gone through the crisis, people will tend to be savers rather than spenders initially when they return to jobs. Fourthly, there seems to have been structural changes in the oil market. Energy prices are unlikely to rise much. This is important as energy is an important input in most production costs. Its direct use by households also has a significant weight in the consumer price index. Fifthly, there are unlikely to be upward wage pressures as long as there is a high level of unemployment. The risk to inflation, in my opinion, comes from a disruption may come from a disruption in supply chain if the trend towards deglobalization picks up. Eventually, when the economy is functioning at full capacity and the unemployment rates come down, Federal Reserve and other central banks will have to resort to higher interest rates and a tighter money policy, which could lead to inflation. But this is not on the horizon yet. What about the increase in national debt that is happening? Canada and other OECD countries have been struggling with rising national debts even before the pandemic. The situation has only become worse since the pandemic, much worse. The governments can deal with the debt either by raising taxes or by reducing expenditures or by passing it on to the next generation. Going by past record, the governments are likely to take to the path of least resistance, that is, pass it on to the next generations. However, they would be able to do so only as long as the interest rates are low. If the interest rates rise, they will have to raise taxes to finance serving the debt. I think most of us will remember what happened in 1990s when Paul Martin had to take some drastic measures to reduce the national debt and deficit. And he's used the expression of come hell or high water. What will be the impact on taxes? I will start here with the lowest level of government, which is municipalities. The financial situation of municipalities is quite bleak following the pandemic. Their major sources of revenues, such as public transportation, rental of recreational facilities or parking tickets, have been severely affected by the pandemic. Moreover, I think you might have heard this morning that the mayor, Jim Watson, is saying that they are going to be reining a deficit of $200 million in revenues, $195 million this year. Moreover, if people start working from home, their homes instead of coming to their downtown offices, this will affect their commercial property taxes. Municipalities are required to balance their budgets in Canada every year and do not have the option to go for public borrowing. Therefore, their only choices are to raise taxes, cut services, or go cap in hand to the provincial and federal governments. I expect them to do all three. Provincial governments. Health expenditure of provincial governments have gone up substantially to fight the pandemic in testing, procuring PPEs, and dealing with the long-term care facility. And the Ontario government's commitment to cut taxes and balance budget will be put under severe test. Expect further cuts in services and rise in the cost of services provided, such as licenses and registrations, even if direct taxes are kept low. What about federal government? The federal government has more tools available to it in dealing with its increased debt and deficits than the other levels of government. It does not have to worry about servicing debt as long as interest rates remain low. Canadian dollar may face pressure if oil prices keep low in face of high debt and deficits. However, Canada's debt to GDP ratio is low relative to other industrialized countries, which provide us some cushion to our currency vis-a-vis currencies other than the US dollar. What about developing countries? I will only touch briefly on that. The impact of the pandemic on developing countries, especially of South Asia and Africa, will be devastating in both short and medium term. These countries, especially their cities, have very high density population with multiple families living in a large dwelling, in a single large dwelling, and sometimes even a single room. It is impossible for them to observe social or physical distance. Many people in these cities do not have enough water even for their daily minimum needs, let alone frequent 22-second hand washes. They do not have the health infrastructure to deal with the resulting health crisis. I'm sure you have heard of the stories of converting schools, banquet halls, and even railway coaches into hospital beds in India. They have to compete with rich countries for scarce supplies of face masks and personal protective equipment and ventilators, and will have to compete for the vaccine when it becomes available. If globalization takes hold, these countries will lose many of the gains made in reducing poverty in the last 2 to 3 decades. These countries also do not have the capacity for supporting relief measures on the scale being provided by rich countries. To make matters worse, many international organizations have suspended aid to developing countries since the corona crisis started. Conclusion. In conclusion, corona-induced pandemic will transform our lives profoundly and in ways which we cannot predict with certainty. We have pointed out only some of the directions they might take. I will end now with a line from a famous song of Sahil Ludhianvi. रात जितनी भी संगीन होगी, सुबह उतनी ही रंगीन होगी. We can use this occasion to reimagine our world, reimagine an economy and a lifestyle which is environmentally sustainable with less reliance on fossil fuels and single-use plastic use. Thank you for your patience for this long lecture without interruption.
First, congratulations, Nand, on an excellent presentation. I would like to add 3 pieces of information to Nand's presentation and then ask the question. The additional information is as follows. Currently, there are over 7 billion cell phones in use in the world, although not everyone is has a smartphone, and there are more than 4 billion internet users spread across some 200 countries. So you see, that part of the foundation of the digital economy is coming into place. What is often missing is affordable broadband access to the internet, which is required as a foundation to deliver telemedicine or teleeducation or a variety of services. And this lack tends to be greater in developing countries or in remote regions. So that's one piece of the argument. The second part is that if you compare this current pandemic with the famous Spanish flu of 1918-19, which some people have done, it seems that the Spanish flu caused far greater mortality, deaths. It's estimated that 50 million died, of which 15 million were in the Indian subcontinent. That's almost 5% of the then population. But the economic impact of the present pandemic seems to be far, far greater than the Spanish flu. So my question to Nand and to other economists here is, why is this so? Is it because the pandemic has accelerated certain trends, such as deglobalization or increasing inequalities, which were already in progress? So that's my question. At the end, I would like to make one other comment to Supriya's generation, but that can wait.
Yeah. Nand, can you go ahead and please?
Thanks, Prabir, for adding that very useful information. As for your question, by the way, you might have read something about it, but I do not know what the economic loss was there during the 100 years ago during Spanish flu. I do know that Spanish flu coincided with the First World War.
The end of the First World War. Yeah, the last year.
Yeah, and following that, we had the Roaring '20s, which sort of the economy really came roaring back. Why we had more economic loss this time? It's partly because we are in a much faster era. Things move at greater speed, and just because the flu also spread much faster than it spread 100 years ago. The communications are much faster. Hopefully the vaccine will be developed much faster also. So everything is moving much faster. So we had the multiplier effect. And that's why I can guess my answer would be, that's probably why we had a more stronger economic loss this time.
Okay, thank you. I'll request Mahmoud Iqbal to please speak with his question.
Basically, I have to add what already Nand has covered a number of points about the way I say, I will look things in a broader perspective, like life after COVID-19. But before that, the question that Prabir raised, now the world is very different. As an economist, I'm saying, because it is globalized, it is integrated, and the trade has become such a 1,000 times larger. So anything which happens in one part of the world is going to be affected the other, not necessarily in terms of only physical, but mostly in terms of economic. But the point I want to add, what Nand has presented, and I will just say only in point forms. First of all, with COVID-19, a bigger question has arisen that many people don't dare to raise. The question is authoritarian regime versus democracies dealing with crisis. Second point is realizing, I'm just saying in point form because You may need 3 or 4 hours for many of these points to be discussed in detail. Realizing importance of experts and scientists. Otherwise, they were just poo-pooed, but now in Trump era, but now again, the experts and scientists, they have become important. And goodbye to globalization or its role declining, which Nand has already pointed out. There is another point is capital substitution and use of more and more technologies to replace labor. It is not only in remote working, but also in production activities in general. And the other point is increasing role of government in our life and economy. And history the role of the government in terms of the percentage, like which is acting, an increase in the debt ratio, it means the role of the government has increased and it is not going to go back. As Nand rightly pointed out, there is a high possibility of a guaranteed income system and so on. Then is the other point is civil liberties, technology monitoring you all the time, you and me all the time. The issue of migrant workers and effect on remittances. It is not only in India that migrant workers are facing challenges. There are all over the world, the migrant work, like even in Canada, the Mexican workers, labor workers, they are facing those challenges. The other point is mental health and family relationship. When you put all those people together in one room or in a house for such a long time, what would be its implications? And the other key point is the strategic industries. More countries are now exploring local production irrespective of cost of production, like medical supplies and so on. So there are so many things because of the COVID-19 that people were not thinking before, and they have to think about it. One more thing, which is none mentioned about the inflation. The main reason that there is a not high, where is a less likelihood any inflation is the inflation is basically a relationship between supply versus demand. When demand is at a lower level, and supply actually, if you look the studies, it is amazing that even with this pandemic crisis, supply chain was not broken. It worked pretty much. So supply is very, naturally it is not to the 100% that it used to be, but it is far better. But demand is highly suppressed because of the loss of job, loss of income, and so on. And since there is less demand, so there is less likelihood of inflation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mahmood.
Okay, thank you, Mahmood. I think for those who don't know, Mahmood is our one of our very prominent of our Aldin seniors group. Mahmood, those are all wonderful points. I would, as I think I already mentioned, that the demand is going to be part of this money supply is really replacement of the income lost because of the job losses. And you're right, you know, the demand, if the demand is going to be low because of high unemployment and all those other reasons, money supply really is only one part of it. The other thing that you asked the question was about the differences between the democracies and authoritarian regimes. Now here, at first blush, it appears that the authoritarian regimes can handle it better. Obvious example is China, how they controlled it. But at the same time, on the other side, you can also see that it is the reluctance of the authoritarian regime to let the information known and to suppress the information that created this problem, and that turned this epidemic into a pandemic by punishing the person, the doctor, who try to bring this into open. Also, in terms of control, by the way, even Modi is not a dictator, but he really acted like a dictator when he did the clampdown on with a 4 hours notice. He did act like a dictator, and you can see the result of that. And some of the democracies like Korea, like Singapore, like Taiwan, like Germany, they have done quite well too. So I don't know that the question can be easily answered. Which one? What can say is wherever the governance is strong, the results are better.
Mahmood, you have a follow-up?
Yes,
Yeah.
I completely agree what Nand said. When we speak about democracy versus authoritarian, we have to wait. I have to just add only one point, because the Western media, at least, they don't tell the whole truth. The truth itself is extremely subjective. That in China, actually no country or no society will suppress something which can also negatively affect itself. No one can say that when pandemic takes place, only it will affect these number of people or this part of the world, and it is not going to affect. The fact up to this point is this: when Xi Jinping knew it, the information was suppressed only for 6 days. But when we talk about democracies or the Western system, America, according to all reports, they did not take measures at least for 6 weeks. At least from the first day of January, the information was there, the pandemic is there, and it is moving. But America and even Europe was very late in terms of reaction. So that is my only point.
Thank you. Kamal, you had a question?
No, not right now.
No, okay.
Okay.
Nand, do you want to have a rejoinder to Mahmood's comments? Or?
That's okay.
Yeah.
Jagmohan, I would just say one thing here. Edward Darby has been sending me questions on chat, and Edward, I am not able to read very well. So probably for the benefit of everyone, if you want, you can ask the question, and then everybody will know, and I will also know what your question is, and I'll respond to that. I hope you can do that. Thank you.
Edward, you can unmute yourself and ask the question if you wish to. No, I don't see a video and no response.
Hello,
Yeah,
can you
okay.
hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, so Nand, what my question is basically is that the world is facing a crisis, but a crisis that has been long in the coming. Wherever there is a high concentration of people, COVID-19 has, the people there have taken a big toll. So what we need to learn from this is perhaps we need to reduce the population density globally. And one of the things that we could do is copy one thing that China did well, but did not do it as well as it could have done. They limited families to just one child for 30 years. And in so doing, they managed to prosper. The thing is, we take a different view about these things. We should at least, now that we have postponed death, reduced child mortality, extended life, etc., shouldn't we at the same time consider the most important issue that is facing the planet today is the global population increase, the runaway global population increase. And can we at this time take this opportunity to limit couples not to just one child, but to one pregnancy, so that there is no preference between choosing a male over a female, which is what China is facing today. I wonder what your opinions are.
Edward, I think you have raised very valid points. And yes, we should have a population control to some in some countries. I don't think we need it in Canada or in Europe, but in some countries, in Africa and South Asia, yes, that is needed. However, I might point out, I can't help thinking that epidemics and pandemics have been there, since the ancient times, biblical times. You have the biblical plagues. So I won't necessarily relate it, this pandemic, with the with population too much. But yes, the point is well taken. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to pose a question?
Yes, I will.
Yeah, please go ahead.
My request will be, Nanji, because every crisis opens new doors, also further opportunities, and you refer to that there. The impact of that on ICCC, like we keep talking about the community center, which we have not been able to get that, and it's a lot more multi-million-dollar investment there. We will continue to pursue it there, but I would be very much interested in knowing your views on that. The size and everything else becomes now into a question. With all the convention centers, all the hotels being closed, a lot of public places, it limits their temples and so on. I do not personally foresee them opening full scale for quite a while. I'm just curious, that what, if you have got any data on that, or any studies, which are forecasting that.
Forecasting, when these temples will reopen?
Not when they will reopen, the capacity utilization of those, just like you mentioned about the office buildings. Similarly, all of these convention centers and so on, their utility or capacity utilization.
Okay, if I understand your question right, Kamal, yes, because the office and other kind of things are being less used, and will be probably less used once the pandemic is over. There may be the possibilities of using one of the existing facilities, repurpose them for ICCC instead of sort of building something new. Yes, I would agree with that. Yes.
Maybe I should explain, I didn't convey my question right. We have been focusing very much on the virtual community center in the last 2-3 years. The need for the physical center will also always exist. There will be a hybrid, as you mentioned in your presentation. So under those circumstances, if there is any study or any forecasting that the proportionate use, there will be a decline, just like in the office space there, will there be a decline in the community usage facilities also?
No, I have not seen any study about
Okay.
the community decline of the community facility.
Okay.
No.
Okay, we have 2 last requests, and then we'll close after that. Prabir wants to speak on something as a follow-up.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
My question is really a follow-up to Ken's question. In other words, do we see this virtual form of meeting, particularly for serious presentations, as an effective, if not replacement, but supplement to our physical meetings when the immediate crisis is over? Because if we do, then this is something on which we should focus more attention and perhaps concentrate greater resources in our activities. That was the general comment, but I did have one other question, and that is, with your permission, Jagmohan, I address to Supriya Tandon. She's the youngest, she's the only member of the younger generation present at this forum. Would she care to give her views on how her generation sees the effect of the pandemic?
So Priya, would you like to answer that? So if so, then unmute. Yes, please, go ahead. Yeah.
the question is how my generation sees the pandemic.
Yep.
I think for millennials, I'm at the tail end of millennials, and I think this is just one of major calamities that have happened in the past. I first came into university and 9/11 happened, which was a major crisis event. And then there's been other crisis events that have happened in the meantime. And then in the long term, we also have climate change that we're grappling with. And then, sorry, after 9/11 was the major recession. And then now here's the pandemic. I think depending who you ask, what's been great for someone like me is that the rhythm of life has slowed down a little bit. And so we've been able to reflect and not perhaps just go to work, take the metro home, eat, and then go to sleep and rinse, repeat. Now I've taken the time, I've been able to spend a lot of time with my parents, which I haven't been able to do before. So there's good and bad. There's bad in the sense that I haven't had job security and I can't see job security coming for a very long time, but maybe having a job, a secure job, isn't the most important thing in life either. Maybe there's other avenues, and thinking on Indian culture, there's other avenues to have fulfillment in our lives.
Thank you, Supriya. Mahmood, would you like to?
Yes. The question which was raised about Edward, first of all, if you look, if you believe in facts and evidence, then there is a significant decrease in fertility rate in all parts of the world with education and prosperity. That is one fact. And second thing, The Economist magazine, which is highly conservative magazine, according to their analysis, the long-term advantage of Asia and Africa would be its demography, especially life after like pandemic, because we will need more and more young people and so on. So this topic it is a huge topic, and it will need a separate presentation. But looking things what it used to be about 30 or 40 years ago, it is very short-sighted. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Jagjit Khosla, you want to say? Yeah, please unmute yourself. Yeah, thank you.
A couple of things. First thing is that Nand, you have looked at the economic impact of pandemic. How about social impact, especially with respect to sufficient large number of job losses, or even changes in the way the economy runs? Could you comment on that?
Nand.
Oh my God, that's a social impact.
Presentation.
Yeah, that's a large subject in itself. Somebody just on a humorous side, somebody mentioned that people who were born during depression, grew up in depression in the 1930s, all their lives they have not been able to sort of let go of that feeling of thing. We're not able to spend freely. We're not able to enjoy we're always kind of, if I can say, miserly in terms of money tight-fisted. The influence that time. And I think they're saying that the generation, the younger generation, that people who are now 10, 12 years old, they probably will be washing their hands all their life. They'll be germaphobes. I think in terms of social, I guess probably we already are seeing the impact that people are going to be less concerned, more concerned about viewing each other with a very intimate kind of interactions. But my feeling is that these kind of things are going to only last as long as the pandemic lasts. In terms of long-term effects of of things, again on a humorous note, some people are saying that this pandemic probably is going to lead to some temporary burst in population and childbirth. We'll see in 10 months' time if that happens. Other than that, I can't say much. If somebody else has opinions, they can express.
Okay, now, so we'll come to the last. I will at the very end. I will request Kamal to make closing statements. But let me take this time to express my personal thanks to Nand Tandan and to all those who participated in this session and asked questions and offered their comments. It's been a great way to get together, and it was nice to see so many faces again after a long time. So thank you very much. I wish you all good health and stay safe. So may I request Kamal to make some final remarks?
Thank you, Jagmohanji. First of all, thank you very much to you for sending the invitation on behalf of the ICCC Speakers Forum and organizing and conducting this session. Thank you very much to Nand Tandon for, as I said, and congratulations for a well-researched, well-thought-out presentation. Yes, the social impact, the last question, there can be probably another presentation on that alone, if someone wishes to come forward for that. The third thing, again, I'll repeat myself that please, this kind of sessions will be continuing. Please come forward if you would like to make a presentation. The old Speakers Forum, the group lunches also will continue, but this is an add-on activity to the regular sessions there, so that we can bring forward the participation of many people as participants as well as speakers there, and portray the incredible talent which in all walks of life we have. There can be various kind of talks there. And please encourage your friends and acquaintances, not only within the community, but even going outside. We belong in the mainstream, and we should come invite mainstream speakers also onto that. So those are my things, and thank you very much to all of you who joined in today. Some left in between. If it becomes too technical, yes, there are other forums like Seniors Forum where we have jokes and so on and sing songs and other activities there. There are presentations done in the Seniors Forums also. They are different kind. So please feel free to join either one of these presentations. The virtual reality is going to be with us, and we will continue with it there. ICCC will focus more and more on these activities there. And if you have any ideas, please forward it to ICCC. We are open to ideas. We welcome your ideas, and we will consider all the ideas, which we'll present there, and then we'll work forward. In the last 3 years, if we have done nothing else, we have tried to convey this message that we are open. We want everyone's input. We are action oriented. And while we were having this session, I should mention, go into the Baljit Nagpal's Aapki Farmaish program. We advertised this forum on that also. And there was an interview with the president, which was done, and it will be posted very soon on the ICCC website, so that you know what we are doing, what is our goal there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamalji, and thank you, and congratulations on conducting a very good leadership. Under your leadership, ICCC has done some exemplary work, and we are all happy and thankful for that. Thank you once again. Thanks to all.
Credit goes to all of you people for supporting, all of you. And I sincerely mean that. I'm blessed that I have taken the job there, or it was handed over to me, but it's only people like you who will make it successful, ICCC. And especially the younger generation, which is the future of ICCC. So Priya, please see if you can encourage your friends and others also to take more active part in ICCC. And we will give any seed money or any support, whatever you need to get some activities going.
Uncle G, I would like that, except for I live in Montreal.
Doesn't matter, under this virtual age, you can do from anywhere.
True.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.